Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the MNCAA podcast, Gophers edition, That Gopher Hockey Puckcast. This is episode 128. I'm Drew Cove alongside Nate Wells, as always, with you this season, talking Gopher hockey. This episode 128 comes to you right after the Gophers played 2 games at South Bend against the team affectionately known to some as the Golden Domers. I think that's a great nickname. But Notre Dame, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish from Compton Family Ice Arena, the Gophers got it done, Nate. A Friday 6-3 win and a Saturday 5-3 win. The Gophers get it done against Notre Dame. Let's just jump right into Friday as well. Nathan Airy got the start. That's foreshadowing for later. But Nathan Airy got the start on Friday night. And they give up a goal really early. I think it was a minute and a half in. But then they kind of storm back the usual suspects, which is half the team, which we will name by the end of the show. More than half the team. We'll just start reading down the roster because a lot of them had good weekends. But Nate falling behind early, another instance of foreshadowing that we'll get to when we talk about Saturday. But just getting down 1-0 early and then coming back to kind of to really take the reins again, even though Notre Dame kind of fought back at various times. But it certainly was, a lot of scoring from a lot of different high-end players that the Gophers have on the roster.
Stop me if you've heard this before. Minnesota had played a slow opening 5, a slow opening 10, and fell behind. And honestly, they're lucky it's not a 2-0 deficit. Stick taps to the split benches at Compton for letting Minnesota have a great view for a waved off goal for an offsides.
Mm-hmm.
But the big difference for the Gophers were early on, and this kind of happened both nights, where Notre Dame was able to be opportunistic and create some really good chances early and test the defense out of position and test Nathan Airy, while Minnesota was able to kind of build consistency and string together good shifts in a row from line to line to line. And that was the difference in the first period, where August Falloon, again, welcome back August Falloon after being injured. Minnesota could certainly use some more healthy bodies. Also foreshadowing for that later. But he finds Brody Lamb. They're able to connect, and I believe that was about 3 good shifts in a row there where they get the tying goal, and then Minnesota just does what Minnesota does best, where the power play, special teams take over. They're able to use their depth and create opportunities. They get shots. Nathan Airy settled down, kind of had a Brad Radke-esque performance where he struggled in the beginning and then went on to be a very solid goalie in net and gave up 3 goals. But at the same time, other than the first one, I don't think I'd really fault him for any of them on Friday. So it was an interesting game on that end. But yeah, the Gophers were just able to kind of be calm, collect, and recalibrate, and just kind of be consistent with stringing together positive shifts and spend time in the Notre Dame offensive zone. It wasn't anything fancy, but just good old-fashioned hockey.
Yeah, it was really good to see too. Obviously, the Gopher power play has been very good, and as you mentioned, just a lot of success in that area. And man, the Gophers just it looked so effortless at times when they were on the power play. Just the movement, finding loose pucks when the pass didn't go to plan or the whole entry didn't even go to plan. It's just they know, like, not even just their high end, really like super high IQ guys like Matthew Wood with that kind of like turnaround falling assist to just get it right on the tape in front of the net, but it's just like guys just being in the right position, guys just knowing where to be, being in the right position, keeping their eyes where they need to be, keeping their sticks where they need to be. And so it makes it look like everything was just like pre-planned, but it's just like they're just really good at the structure is working, and the team is really thriving off of that structure and that ability to kind of understand where the play is going to be. Because the power play looked fantastic, I think, all weekend, especially Friday as well, just with all the opportunities that they got, and a little more on that in a minute here. But they certainly took advantage of what chances they got, and kind of, you just gotta. It's hard because like teams can say, okay, we know how we can beat Minnesota, and like we've seen it like the Omaha thing where it's like you got to get goalied, but you also have to not take penalties. And it's like, well, that's easier than like goalieing somebody, but like it's still tough. It's like you're gonna take a penalty here. Like it's not often that you're gonna go a full 120 minutes without taking a penalty at all. And giving an opportunity to these Gophers is a very ill-advised move, whether or not it's inevitable or not. So yeah, that kind of leads me into the next point a little bit here, Nate. I know we talked about it before we sat down, and I don't think there's an update, but Gophers did get a large penalty or a large power play to work with on Friday's game, thanks to Janicki going knee on knee on the Gophers' leading goal scorer, Brody Lamb. Which a lot of people, if you would have had that on the Bing, or like given even me a few chances to guess, like I'm kind of always I'm like just perusing the stats, and if he just kind of snuck up as the goal leader, I would have said, oh, maybe Connor Kurth or maybe Snuggerud or something like that. But no, Brody Lamb, the Gophers' leading goal scorer, was knocked out with a pretty gruesome. Like I think noted Twitter person CJ Fogler had the GIF on Twitter, X, whatever, and it did not look good. But I don't think, as of recording this Sunday afternoon, I don't think there's an update currently. But gosh, Nate, that's especially when we talked about August Falloon coming back. That's a tough one to see, especially from a guy who's been surging right at the right time for the Gophers.
It was really tough to see, and it was such a play where that might have been the quickest review I've ever seen a ref do, where they were in, they were out. The guy, Janicki, was given the game misconduct. Even before Brody Lamb was able to get off the ice, and it wasn't that he was down for a while. It was just that quick. And Justin Janicki was suspended for Saturday's game. Brody Lamb was not in Minnesota's lineup. As we're recording this, as you mentioned, Drew, there hasn't been an update. If you're listening to this, there might have been one. But it just goes to show where Minnesota's been with injuries, where Kel Thomas is still out. Seems like he's getting closer. Erik Paulsson's pretty much out for the rest of the first half. Brody Lamb would be a major loss, and it's more of not as much on the goal scoring and what he's been able to do for this season, making that jump from sophomore to junior year, which is very impressive and very important. But it's another knock in Minnesota's depth where it's just when you're losing 3-4 players that are on the injured shelf, there's only so many people that you can have come and replace. There's only some people that you can have come and replace in a Erik Paulsson or Brody Lamb. So on that end, yeah, it's really tough. And Minnesota took advantage of those opportunities that Notre Dame gave them. And that was the big thing with Friday, where the Fighting Irish's biggest sustained effort was towards the end of the first in a 1-1 game. Take a offensive zone penalty. Sam Renzel makes them pay right away. Sam Renzel makes Notre Dame pay again for the major at the end of the period. I mean, credit to him. I think he bounced both of them. I think he bounced both goals off of Notre Dame players.
Yeah.
To get them in. So you had that. Aaron Hughlin got a penalty shot at one point in that Friday game. They scored a power play goal. So yeah, the power. If you follow Gopher hockey, you know how that penalty shot went.
Exactly.
I don't even have to tell you what happened in it.
Hughlin's been around too long to be the guy to change that narrative. It needs to be some guy. It needed to be like an Axel Begley kind of player, where it's like, all right, you're playing in one of your first few games, like you just got to be really fresh to the program if you're going to come in and get a penalty shot and score on it, just to be like, okay, now the tide is finally turning for the Gophers in that area of the game.
You remember the one that Jack Ramsey had against I think it was Wisconsin. He had one of those where it was this thing where he had to have.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's kind of that going that
like,
one.
And Don's like, can anyone else take it? Right?
Yeah. There's I was gonna say, if anyone hasn't listened, I think it's the GPL podcast. Not last season, maybe it was 2 seasons ago, where where he goes in depth about that. But it was just it's been a while. I started covering. Christian Hansen scored one in a playoff series against Alaska. And this was 2011, and I think that was one of the first series I covered, and I think it's like him, Leon Bristadt, and Vinny Lettieri are like the only ones I think I've seen pull off. And this is
See,
like
Vinny
12
either
years or
scored on
something.
it or broke a stick trying to flex it too much,
Yeah, Vinny scored. I know. I remember that it was a game against Michigan where he scored one, and then Michigan scored one too.
Wow.
So like you don't forget 2 penalty shots in the same game.
Very, very gimmicky game. Wow, that must have been.
Yeah, it's also really rare because in college you get the option to choose. You can take the penalty. You don't have to take the penalty shot.
Yeah, maybe both teams were just feeling a little aggressive that day. In Minnesota, Michigan, that's one thing that they're both no strangers to being aggressive when it comes to their offense in a bunch of regular season games. But Nate, obviously, good result Friday with the asterisk of the leading scorer going down to kind of unknown fate at this point. Just a few days after the games, he didn't play Saturday, obviously, but also Janicki got the game suspension, did not play in Saturday's game as well. But Saturday, Gophers win 5-3. Yeah, Nate, I know you mentioned too. We both talked about this a little bit. The gold breezers, the off-white, the vintage white is, I think it's what some uniform insiders call it. The cream color jersey, gold breezers. It was a lot of like off yellow, very Thanksgiving themed jerseys, in my opinion, for how they looked with the kind of brown off-white gold-ish type thing.
I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I feel like those are better jerseys and jersey breezer combination for Notre Dame than like their normal blues and their normal jersey. And I get the normal jersey is kind of in the Notre Dame style, but it's certainly I like. I think it flows better on TV. It looks good, and they might be burying them at some point because I feel like they're like something like 0-3 or 0-4 at this point wearing them. But they work for me, so Notre Dame keep using them. You know, you can use those. I'll let you have those green jerseys you wear like twice a year too. Just
like those. Yep. But the Gophers obviously taking advantage of something Notre Dame has struggled with this year is Saturdays, and but it didn't get started like that into the 5-3 win. Notre Dame scored first again, and they scored first on Nathan Airy. He played on a Saturday. Nate, what's this? I thought we kept hearing that it was going to be one game in, one game out, and who didn't see the net this weekend one bit? Liam Soulier. So Nathan Airy with a full series under his belt, 3 goals apiece. But like you mentioned in talking about Friday's game, I mean, I think he looked he looked very similar in that he made a bunch of saves, but a lot of the saves or a lot of the goals that he couldn't stop were, I mean, he was kind of hung out to dry. There was a couple defensive lapses. I mean, there was one that I think it was Mike Kester and Sam Rinzel, where it was just kind of Kester was caught behind the net and Rinzel was a little too far away, and there was just a guy out front, and it's just he was right in on him. How much chance does he have? But especially when you get the win, you can't really overanalyze it too much. But I think great weekend, great showing from Nathan Airy when he gets 2 games in a row, and we'll see what happens going forward. But Nate, it was really good showing and a good opportunity to see one goalie kind of just hold it down over one opponent over a given weekend.
We wondered when Bob would give one of the goalies a shot at back-to-back games, and it turns out it was this weekend against Notre Dame. He said he had a hunch, and we got the opportunity to see how Nathan Airy responded. I mean, I don't think you could say that really both goalies have played well. Neither goalie, Airy nor Soulier, have really had to steal any games. And Airy's performance for me, both games were kind of similar, where I think he wants the first one back. But after that, it was any goal. He didn't make the saves he needed to win a game outside of one game on Saturday with a partial breakaway in the third period in a tie game. That one certainly about 2 or 3 minutes before Brody Zemer got what was the game-winning goal. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest save of the weekend. It's probably the one that really stands out to, hey, this is a goalie who can win a game, but he's also not someone who he's losing the game where the performance is taken away from what Minnesota's doing. Obviously, you want to give up less than 3 goals both nights, and honestly, credit to credit to Notre Dame, because you don't really expect to have these two kind of offensive shootouts, but they've been scoring goals. They've not been the defense of Notre Dame. I really don't know what's going on with the Big Ten this year, where it feels like every team's kind of like playing in different styles, or just is able to do different things. You have that. I mean, you have the Notre Dame with kind of a few kind of cheap. Let's say cheap shot. I'm sorry, that Janicki one. It was suspended. It was quick. It was cheap. No one's really going to go on there, but it just, it's not fully the Notre Dame you expect to see. But we'll see what happens kind of this weekend. Prince Baxulier, if he gets an opportunity to play both games, or if it's just the platoon. But for having that opportunity to play back-to-back, and I believe that's the first time Nathan Aries played back-to-back games in college hockey, I will say it was a test. It was a great test, and he passed.
Yeah, and exactly, and kind of moving on the front end too, to get some of those goals to overcome those 3 against. Oliver Moore, what a weekend from him, and obviously we'll get to the rest of the roster and name them each individually soon. But Oliver Moore, just a really good weekend, really good showing. He was in on a lot of things that weren't just his goals. But Nate, what'd you see from him, and what'd you like to see from a guy that I feel like we've been kind of waiting to really hype up and to see that really big showing, and kind of welcome to college hockey moment to really add some more hype to what he came in with.
Yeah, it feels like at times where he's been making an impact, maybe not on the score sheet, but he's been getting those opportunities, and either they're just going wide, they're in the post, or he's setting up his line mates. And in this case, it's just the last 2 weekends, you're seeing him pop up more and more, and he's contributing on the score sheet. He's getting the goals. He got the goals both games this weekend. And that's exactly what you want to see. I mean, I thought the goal on Friday was just perfect. It's getting right place, right time, and it's the effort. It's a play that is an individual play, but also understanding where everyone is on the ice. And that's not an easy thing to do entering college hockey. You can have the skill, but you still just, everyone's a little faster. Everyone's able to use their body a little bit more. And it just seems like the way that he's scoring and the way that he's contributing, especially these past 2 weekends against teams like Bemidji and Notre Dame, where there's just something that's kind of clicked, and he's starting to have that breakout. And I mean, this is a perfect time to have an Oliver Moore kind of kick in that next gear in the college hockey level for Minnesota.
Yeah, it's great to see that. Plus, especially Saturday's result. Obviously, like we mentioned, the Gophers went down 1-0. They ended up scoring 3 goals to make it 3-1. But shortly thereafter, the Gophers ended up seeing the game tied again at 3. Kind of a little bit of a defensive lapse, and obviously there was a kind of an ill-advised penalty taken near the end of the second period, and kind of put the Gophers up against it there with a tie game. But like we mentioned a little earlier with Brody Zemer, one Brody filling in while the other's out, and also Friday Night Jimmy is now Saturday Night Jimmy. It like all these roles are changing, but I think both of them look really good, especially on the Zemer goal that ended up being the game winner. Just 2 really good, I think a good weekend from the both of those guys. And obviously I think 5 points for Snuggerud, and Zemer with some really good looks and some really good chances, and some goals. So it's really good to see those guys thrive when it mattered, and more importantly to see Minnesota kind of not keep reeling after 2 goals against, especially close to the end of a period, and to see a 3-1 lead fall into a deficit, or rather just the tying that kind of ended up there at 3-3, and kind of settling things down, taking control back, and still getting out with all 6 points.
Yeah, I haven't seen that much from Minnesota, if at all, this year, where taking a bad penalty, very disciplined team. That the Peacock had a nice little graphic on Friday's game where it's like the difference between Minnesota's penalty minutes and Notre Dame's penalty minutes is about the Fighting Irish had about twice as much as the Gophers did, and Minnesota's been very, very disciplined team, taking a bad offensive zone penalty with about 35 seconds left in the period, giving up a game tying goal, kind of a nice puck low lie play by the Irish, and it would have been very easy to fold just seeing how the Gophers took so much advantage of scoring early, scoring late in periods, and having it go against them. And just, they turned around. They controlled play through the third period. They won the period. They won the game. They swept the weekend where they took 6 points on the road and are 6-0-0 in the Big Ten with 4 road wins, which is, you can say that the Gophers haven't still played the top 3 teams in the Big Ten, and that's very true. But they're beating the teams that they've been playing in front of them, and that's more than we can say about last year's team. They're doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, Nate, and I think that goes perfectly into kind of the next part, just kind of talking about the weekend as a whole. And one thing I know you wanted to bring up, finally a comparison between the two Michigan schools and the other big two in the conference as it sits right now, Michigan State and Michigan, all having a common opponent in Notre Dame. Just what do you think, kind of with those results and kind of seeing what Notre Dame is now and what Minnesota is now compared to what you can. I guess compared to what you can think and what you can see based on their other results against Michigan and Michigan State.
I would say that Minnesota looks like they can compete against Michigan and Michigan State. They're near that top end. How they looked and how they can kind of compare to those schools was my big question entering the weekend, because Minnesota, if you look at who they played, and they can't control how some of those other teams have been performing this year. They've been beating the teams that they need to beat in front of them, but they haven't played a top 5, top 10 team like Michigan and Michigan State have. As right now is kind of the difference in the season, where you're just seeing that. So the last 2 weekends, Notre Dame played Michigan State and Michigan, and I wanted to kind of to be able to have a nice little comparison where you have a common opponent, and it seems similar. Where Minnesota had a night where they're able to kind of blow away and take advantage of opportunities and make the score a little bit more lopsided than it should be, and then they had a closer game, and that's pretty much what all 3 teams had against Notre Dame this season. But you're kind of seeing where there's lots to like with the Gophers. There's still some room to grow. But at the very least, even with the injuries, you're wondering how many of those are kind of playing into it right now. But you can see those pieces are being put together, and the ones even that they have to kind of questions that need to be answered, you can see where the answers will be for a team that is playing well in November, but wants to be playing better when the calendar turns to February and March and hopefully April.
Mm-hmm. And I think it definitely like you mentioned, the injuries. I mean, obviously it's never good to have injuries at any time, but I think better to sustain them now if you can avoid them later, but also better to try and test yourself while you're a little shorthanded and still be as successful as the Gophers have so far, while facing, Paulson being down, Cal Thomas being down in the back end. I think this is kind of throwing John Whipple into the fire a little more than maybe he would have expected early on, as kind of a one game in, one game out kind of guy. But I think he's going to only benefit for this based on, I guess, kind of later in the season is kind of really where it's going to show that a lot of this time showed up here. And sorry about that if you hear the little fire engine outside my house right now, but
getting some ambient noise.
life in the big city, I guess.
Life in the big city, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is good to see that they're able to persevere through these injuries, and I think, just defensively, offensively, Brody Lamb's going to be a huge loss. It's going to put a lot of depending on how long he's out. Again, we don't really know yet, but it's going to put a lot more pressure on those top end guys to continue their top end, I guess, behavior, those top end ways, and give opportunities to guys that, maybe just like August Falloon, who came back and is now kind of has an opportunity to maybe showcase more of what he can do, like Brody Zemer, like Oliver Moore. But it is really interesting to see how those guys kind of show against Notre Dame, and it will be interesting to see when the Gophers can finally play those higher end teams as well, the Michigan and Michigan States. But I guess we talked about
you hit on a very good point, Drew, where you have players, you have even some youngsters who are being put into positions that you would not expect that in the long term is certainly going to help. I thought you mentioned Whipple. I thought Leo Gruba kind of had some growing pains at times this weekend, but I noticed him a lot, especially in the Friday game, where it just seemed like he's certainly having opportunities that you might not want this time of year, but also if you're seeing what he's made of, you have that with playing Erie both nights. and being able to spread the lineup out with depth, but also be able to put things together for the power play. So there are opportunities, and honestly, I like that Minnesota can win and put up goals. I like that Minnesota is able to play these close, tight games. They don't feel that they're out of opportunities, and they're beating the teams that they should be beating.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have more. We'll know more about the Gophers in a few weeks once they host Michigan and Michigan State. But it feels like you can see where things are going right, and you can see the direction that Minnesota is going in. And there's room to grow, but there's very few teams that you would say this time of year that's not the case.
Exactly, and it is a good problem to have a lot of these kind of have those growing pains, but also be having success at the same time. Kind of best of both worlds. You're learning a lot about yourself, but you still have enough established talent that you're able to beat the teams that you need to beat and the ones that are on the schedule, frankly. So it's good to see for the Gophers that another weekend where they don't accumulate any losses, still just 2 losses on the season, which is good, especially this time of year, right? As kind of we head into the last stretch of almost conference play before this next weekend that we're going to get to in a little bit. But Nate, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about, because this is the one of the few opportunities we get or we're going to have with the Peacock broadcast this year. If you're only watching Gopher hockey, this is the Peacock broadcast weekend. NBC, I know you kind of want to talk about it a little bit because there's some of the gaffes, the Jason Zemer, the Miles Wood. But I certainly thought it was a good overall production. The NBC ticker to me just still looks really dated. It feels like it's 2012 to me, but that has zero impact on anything. So it's just my own brain being weird. But I thought it was a good broadcast overall, despite some of the gaffes that kind of came through. But it is good, and especially when it is kind of a crapshoot, like we talk about between when the TV is so decentralized, even though Big Ten makes that a lot more centralized, but kind of when it kind of is up to the school to do whatever they can. And sometimes you get a student run like Midco kind of thing, or sometimes you get the full on Jim Rich show with the Gophers and a pregame show and everything. So what are your thoughts kind of on what we got from Peacock this weekend?
Oh, from a production standpoint, it's first class. And I am fortunate being out here in New York City, where I think I get more college hockey on TV than anyone does, because I get all the BTN stuff here. SNY, which is the regional sports network that the Mets have, they'll have a couple of local schools. So LIU's on there, Sacred Heart's on there, and they just picked up some of the ECAC games that are broadcast with ESPN Plus. So they have those as well. The Yankees regional sports network had a few Army games last year that they kind of also picked up in the same way. And then for some reason we get NESN too, so I get to watch some of those as well. And from a production standpoint, I mean, I'd say it's probably, other than BTN, along with BTN, it's and the CBS Sports Network, it's the gold standard. It was fantastic. The gaffes were a little disappointing, kind of sometimes we expect from somebody who this is their third sport. They're doing it because it's not more of an obligation than bringing it in. I think I made a joke in our notes where I was like, yeah, Jason Zemer, game-winning goal.
Yes, exactly.
and it occurred to the announcer and then the analyst, because he made a couple of those gaffes right away. They knew that they made a gaff.
Oh, and they caught it
themselves. Yep. They caught it.
Hey, that's just as someone who's not an audio or a big audio radio trained person. I make a million of those gaffes every podcast, so I'm not going to fault them for that. Even though it's funny to point it out, but they catch it right away. They're good at it, and we certainly have a lot of those. But it is kind of a little amusing to sometimes see that, because it's like, oh, and sometimes like the Miles Wood thing. Sometimes I don't process that, because sometimes in my head I think Miles Wood when I see the back of that Gopher jersey. But just a funny one, but still, it is a very good broadcast for one that can be harder to depend on for a very good quality one when it's away from Mariucci Arena.
Yeah, I think they've done a better job with it over the years. The only thing I wish they did maybe a little bit more, and maybe this happens more in the second half when you get away from football, is have some of those Notre Dame have some of those little Notre Dame segments during intermission. But that is on the hockey side. They had the Four Horsemen one, which, by the way, it made me miss Doc Emmerich. If you mentioned that the score bug is bringing back those NBCSN vibes. With Doc Emmerich had it coming out there. I'm like, oh yeah, there we go. You can read Doc can read the phone book, and I'll be very happy.
Mm-hmm. It's like I can just imagine like them. It's some like random January Saturday afternoon game because always the Philadelphia Flyers always play in those Saturday afternoon games, and it's like, oh, the Philadelphia Flyers and the Chicago Black. I'm like, that's the last game I want to watch. As a hockey fan, I am not interested. What does nothing for me. But
here are 9 Sabres games, and they haven't made the playoffs in 6 years. Yeah.
Oh God, those old Ryan Miller Sabres. But
yes.
Yeah. Boy, what can you do? But that kind of moves on, Nate. I mean, not too big of an around the conference segment this week because just so many of them didn't play. As we can kind of jump into right here is that Michigan played Penn State, and that game ended about as, pretty mundane. It was a 6-5 win and then 10-6, a couple of baseball scores put up. But Penn State scored 11 goals in 2 games and did not get a single point. How about that? That's quite the indictment on the defense and the goaltending that Penn State has, and maybe also a good showing on maybe Michigan breaking out its offensive prowess a little bit.
The Wolverines have not shown that same offensive firepower that we know the Wolverines have all season. They've been very content to play defensive hockey, and it's actually great to see this time of year to watch that the Wolverines are able to be successful and win these tight defensive games, because I almost feel like that's kind of their Achilles heels the last few seasons where they made the Frozen Four, but they're successful when they play their own game, and when they come against teams where they have to adjust and win either a defensive game or just they're not the ones controlling the puck. That's when things kind of fall apart. Especially, last year was just a weird thing where they were great for 40 minutes, then 20 minutes, you didn't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And yeah, holy crap. I think it was on Saturday's game, Penn State takes a major and 3 Michigan goals in 5 minutes. Just things went kind of crazy there. And you end up with Penn State scoring 11 goals on the weekend, and credit to them, but not getting any points. I think the Wolverines had something like 6 power play goals on Saturday. It was just they were firing. They're firing on all cylinders. That was the only other Big Ten series too. So
yeah,
they had that game had, oh my God, other than. Wait, so also Penn State had a lot of goals too in the last week against Wisconsin too, where they had the same thing where they fell, because I was just about to say I think they might have outscored Wisconsin's output in the Big Ten this season, but no, they had that one too.
Yeah, no, it was a weird weekend from that series too. But the only other thing that any Big Ten team did is Michigan State beat up on their minor league feeder team, the US NTDP. That's kind of a bad joke because the Gophers take plenty of players from there too, but right in their backyard, Adam Nightingale, kind of a lot of connections to that program. So no surprise, Michigan State beating them 6-2 in the one exhibition game that they played against them. But one thing, kind of moving on to the next weekend, the Gophers face Alaska Fairbanks in week 2 of the Don Lucia Classic. We're facing all the Don Lucia connected teams except for CC in the next.
Then they had CC in 2024 too. So
exactly. So all within a calendar year, they're getting all the Don Lucia teams long after he's gone. But
they get that. I feel like St. Thomas should probably be like an unofficial Don Lucia team.
That counts.
Any
CCHA team.
Yeah, so you have a Catholic CCHA school. That feels very Don.
It is a good one. We have to keep marking those as what Don Lucia Bowl do we get? Do we get 3, 4, or 5 of them this year? And this year we get 3 of them. But the Gophers play Alaska Fairbanks. They get to Fairbanks is a 4-6-2 so far this year. They did not play this past weekend. But kind of tying in Notre Dame, they did play Notre Dame already this season. They split with Notre Dame. They lost 2 to Penn State. They have played a couple of teams. Union, I think, was number 20 around the time when they played them, just kind of in and out or receiving votes, something like that. Clarkson as well, and they both split with those teams, but they played both of them, or they won and tied in some kind of overtime loss. But still, I think Alaska they've got some common opponents. I think the Gophers should absolutely beat them, but 2 weeks ago they lost they split to Anchorage. Sorry, I thought I was looking at 2 different games for a second, but split with their cross-state rival in Anchorage, and we'll see how it turns out this weekend, but it should be an interesting series against the Nanooks.
One of the best jerseys in all of college hockey,
and the best intros.
The best
of all
intro,
time.
yes. But Josh, that makes me sad to realize that we're about a year or two away from commits being not born when the beginning of those intros happened.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to feel old, I'm sorry, but I'm bringing you down with me. Alaska is always a team. It's a good team. It's a tough team to play against. They always seem to give their best against the top teams in the country.
Yeah.
Feels like they've taken down Notre Dame a couple of times in recent years. They either took down Denver or took them to overtime recently as well. So they're a tough team to play against. This should be a good test. It'll be good to have this end of non-conference play. I know they have one at the kickstart the end of the year, but we're kind of just being able to all focus in on the big games for the rest of the season. So I'm excited on that, and it's good. It's also good to have Alaska in town. It's great to have. It's great. It's great to have teams that you don't see too often make their way, and especially like an independent team like Alaska, just be able to get them back on being able to get them back on schedules and just finding ways to do that. Like, it's really nice that we're seeing that with a lot of the schools where they'll find ways to get Lindenwood in there, Augustana during their couple independent years, Arizona State for that stretch during the pandemic where they kind of joined the Big Ten unofficially.
Yeah.
And we have the Alaska schools, and just it especially in a time where you're still wondering where college hockey is going to go. There's a lot of moving parts. There's some money coming in. You have the CHL players who are going to be eligible beginning next season. You have schools that have already indicated that they're going to drop down to D2. You're looking to see if you have any more Power 5 or Power 4 conference teams decide to take the jump and join in. And so there's a lot of things that we're trying to figure out where college hockey is going. But at the end of the day, it feels like the sport rallies around its own and rallies around just anyone who decides to make a team and have a program. And that's one of the great things I like to see, where you have a school like Minnesota who is happy to play a team like Alaska.
Yeah, and especially when they play a lot of those schools that are kind of newer, and obviously there's always a lot of coaching connections and admin connections. I mean, just thinking of Augustana and Garrett Aboyne kind of being on the Gophers bench for a few years, but it is good to see that kind of not paying it forward, but saying, okay, you know what, you're a real team. We're going to give you a real challenge, and here's how you're gonna learn things about your team by playing with some of these established teams, and hopefully accelerate their development to be one of the more to be a very competitive team at the D1 college level. But, and also too, Nate, I kind of mentioned the schedule for Alaska Fairbanks just because that is a team that I think is better than their record shows. And I mean, a team that was pushing to make the tournament a few years ago, and had they been in a conference, I mean, they could have had a very legitimate shot to make the tournament. And considering how close they got in the pairwise rankings, just still being an independent team was really remarkable from an Alaska school that both of them have been kind of imperiled at various points over the last 20 years and even longer. But it was really good to see that. And it's good to have them in town to see kind of a fun non-conference independent team as well. And it also just the intro, good excuse, good time peg to watch the intros. I showed my girlfriend those for the first time. She was like, what is happening? They're like, why are they blowing up Michigan State? And I'm like,
all right, how much time do you have about the CCHA?
CCHA
not the current
rivals.
CCHA? Yeah.
Exactly. And like Ohio State, and then like the one that they blow up, Anchorage, makes a lot more sense. And it's like, okay, that's fun. But like, it is just the most wild few minutes, and we'll tweet the links, the good links with that, along with the podcast.
This is not Alaska, but you have to show her some of those Anchorage commercials from like the mid 2000s, because when Minnesota go play Anchorage, then this was something where it was the one series it was like the one or two series that Fox Sports North at the time would not go and show. So, but they would, in Anchorage, they would stream the game. So eventually it would end up crashing because it's 2006 and they don't have the bandwidth to have the insane amount of Gopher fans who are going to go try to watch a video stream.
Exactly.
But holy crap, the commercials for those are like the best things I've seen. I'm gonna send you a couple and you have to show her them. They're amazing.
I will, and then I'll get back to you next week on their hit rate, so to speak, and see if it really resonated. But I have a feeling they won't, but it'll be really funny for me. So, because
Yeah.
it'll probably be my first time watching them, or if any, or in a long time too. So, it'll be a fun experiment. But Nate, I think that does it for us. Alaska Fairbanks on the docket for the Gophers. They're both on Fox 9 Plus, Big 10 Plus. So back to reality, back to normal stuff. So if you're able to watch the Gopher games most of the time, you're going to be able to watch them now, and obviously you can listen on the radio as well. But Nate, until next week when we break down this series and the upcoming Big 10 slate, that's it for us. Until next week, we'll see you at the rink.